Hi, fantasy readers. This is Karyne Norton, your fellow bookbinger, and you are listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, where you can test out a new fantasy story every single week to find your next favorite author. Today's story has an intriguing cast, each holding their own mysteries in a dying world. It's written by Karyne Jane, a USA Today best-selling author who writes royally epic fantasy set in elaborate secondary worlds rich with slow-burn romance, myth, magic, and fast-paced action. She's also a lover of sassy chihuahuas and bobbed-tail cats. I did a bit of a double take on that one because we actually get bobcats in our backyard because I live sort of on the edge of a desert town, and I do not like when they show up in our yard around our kids or our 5-pound dog, which, like a sassy chihuahua, would be a snack to a bobcat. But I'm guessing bobbed tail cats are a certain kind of cat, which goes to show how little I know about cats. Anyway, Kelly's coffee mug is always full, and she believes dessert goes with every meal. I'm totally on board with the second of those two statements. When not in front of her keyboard, she's probably reading, painting, playing with yarn, or lost in her imagination. I'll be narrating today's story, which is a bit of a longer one, so stick around to the end or check out today's show notes to see where you can find more from Kelly. For now, please enjoy Rule of Primes by Karyne Jane. Chapter 1. Light sang through Albruna's essence as she descended to the bottom of the staircase. The solid world of Edenia took shape around her, its cool air prickling her newly formed skin. Each footstep brushed the glowing stairs as softly as feathers, but darkness clouded her vision. The same disorienting blur that came with every transformation. The few times she shifted made her physical body uncomfortably foreign, a flesh and bone prison she could never normalize. Just temporary. The shallow whisper caught in her throat. The primary spring should have embraced her like a warm blanket and eased her transition. Something wasn't right. The underground cavern yawned before her, dominated by the primary spring. The enchanted waters were aptly named for their sacred purpose, but in her mind, the pool seemed more like a simple cistern, though she'd never say as much to the High Father, Osric. Her husband had more significant issues to deal with. A brazier flickered in the corner, offering a golden view into the shadowy space, but a pungent scent, stinging rather than soothing, gave another hint of trouble within the water. 4 alabaster pillars stood guard around the circular spring, their carved images of vines and birds ascending 20 feet to where curved sections met in a dome. Windows opened to the sky above, allowing light, moon rays or sunshine as it was now, to touch the enchantment-filled water. She'd forgotten how the beautiful columns captured the light, making the stone seem alive. Each of the elements claimed space in the chamber, representing all of Edenia's primary fae lineages. The whispering air, dancing flames, serene water, and glinting mineral mixed with the moon's glow, the sun's warmth, and the spirit's pulse. The waist-deep pool lay half-empty, its marble tiles gleaming like exposed bones beneath the depleted waters. Once vibrant greenery withered in pots at the room's edges, and ivy had nothing but brown stems clinging to dull walls. The entire cavern exhaled neglect. No guardian tended this wellspring of power. No keeper maintained its flow. Instead, silence pecked along Albruna's spine. She perched on the pool's edge and brushed her fingertips on the cool surface. Magic answered, but barely. A guttering candle where there should be starfire. She plunged her entire hand into the spring, freeing her enchantment to surge through her arm, tugging a smile from her lips as the water bloomed with a warm teal hue. There. At least that's... The words died in her throat. Beyond the elegant leaves of several night spire plants, hidden in the far recesses, light glittered off ripples where no water should be. She eased closer, drawn by the anomaly in the shadows. Another pool spread before her, this one carved from the basalt of the chamber itself. Moisture etched shining trails down the hewn walls from a high spout shaped like cupped stone hands. 2 channels led away from the oval pool, one disappearing underground, the other snaking into an old lava tube created when the island of Seganus was formed. This wasn't supposed to be here, and it set her senses on alert, raising the temperature in her newly formed body. Albruna spun to leave the cavern, but 3 steps toward the passage into Aethercrest. The door burst open. Chapter 2. 2 council members, robes flowing like molten silver, rushed into the cavern, jostling each other when they slid to a halt.
"My queen, we did not know you were to arrive."
Pholus, the male druid, 3rd seat on the council, yet speaking first, couldn't seem to decide whether the floor tiles or the air above her shoulder deserved more attention. His beady eyes and twitchy movements gave the impression of a rat darting to avoid a hawk's shadow. Tension coiled through Albruna's fingers. These were the leaders of Seganus, of all Fae throughout Edenia, yet they acted like first-year apprentices. No, she shouldn't disrespect the young paritors like that. Even they would have more sense. She clasped her hands before her, forcing herself to remain calm. The spring is untended. Merib stood motionless, with her dark hair hanging loose, no braids or ornaments, suggesting her sleep had been interrupted. 2nd seat, 2nd to speak, 2nd to bow. My apologies, Queen Albruna. I am eager to hear your explanation. Each word fell like an icy mist into the silence. It had been too long since she visited. A council member should greet anyone who enters this chamber. A paritor, at the very least, should tend our sacred waters. It is why you train the apprentices, after all. Or have such duties become mere suggestions? Copper robes flashed in the doorway. A paritor, finally, though her presence came too late. The girl's eyes showed too much white, like a spooked boar-elk before a storm. Her knees cracked against the basalt as she fell into a bow, the sound echoing off the stone. Rise, Loris. Merib's whisper carved through the silence. Precise, practical, purposeful. The 2nd seat appeared unkempt, but she was not rattled. The High Hepta must be informed of our queen's arrival. Loris backed from the room, each step carefully placed, so even her robes seemed afraid to rustle against the floor. Once beyond the doorway, her slippered feet padded out of sight into the darkness.
The chamber above.
Pholus's words tumbled out while his hands sketched unnecessary patterns in the air.
If your majesty wishes, that is. We could speak in greater comfort.
Demand answers now? Let them stew in their discomfort as they climbed? Albruna's shoulders tightened. The spring's neglect deserved immediate reckoning, but she needed more information. She also understood when to hold her silence, giving a nod of acceptance. This way, Merib said, gliding through the door, brushing her hair over her shoulder after nimble fingers worked a quick braid. The passage stretched and stretched. Every step pressed the foreign weight of her corporeal form deeper into Albruna's bones. Her solid body still felt like borrowed robes, ill-fitting and cumbersome. A constant reminder of the chasm that tore their celestial home in two. They continued until, like a sleeping serpent, a narrow staircase coiled through the raw stone into the heart of Aethercrest, the massive ziggurat at the island's center.
Protocol demands,
Pholus began, his hands fluttering like trapped birds. Protocol, Albruna's voice rippled with irritation, matters less than practicality at this moment. Lead the way, Hepta Pholus. Taller than the others, the stairwell's walls pressed close, too close, scraping against Albruna's shoulders despite how she curled them toward her pointed ears. Her true form would have simply filled the space with light. How did the druids bear such constant constraint? Breath, so simple for those in Edenia, required steady thought. In, out, in, out. The rhythm of Merib's feet on the stone became a meditation. Her newly formed braid hanging down her back gave Albruna a focal point through the dizzying spiral. Finally, the steps gave way to a level vestibule. A simple wooden door swiveled open like a gasp of mercy into a cozy library. Sweet, still air replaced the stairwell's suffocating grip.
"My queen,"
Folus's words wheezed between breaths.
"Refreshments, perhaps? The council chamber."
Another gulp of air.
"Still quite a climb ahead."
Interesting. Merib's shoulders had barely tensed during their ascent, suggesting frequent climbs. Frequent meetings? Secret meetings? The door sealed shut behind them with a whisper, vanishing into the shelving along the wall. A perfect hidden exit. Or entrance. A tray with a waiting carafe sat on a table near the only visible door, glasses arranged in suspicious readiness. Oversized chairs and settees hulked along the walls, their placement too careful to be casual. No one would sit with someone at their back. Every shelf groaned beneath the burden of scrolls, histories of Edenia from its beginning through the current mirror age. "This is a pleasant enough room for a rest." Merib's smooth interjection carried a hollow, informal tone. Her fingers traced the edge of a nearby scroll with relaxed attention. "But the view from the council chamber often aids in perspective." Such a casual authority for one facing her queen. Despite the dryness in Albruna's throat, as parching as the concerns rising within her, she straightened, chin held high. "If you think I am weary, you are mistaken. We continue. Now." Merib's ruby lips pressed white for a heartbeat. The first crack in her composed facade. "Of course, my queen." Each word measured, weighed, and useless. "Though perhaps—" "Now!" Albruna frosted her tone, dropping the temperature in the room. Folus nearly tripped over his feet in his haste to reach the door, protocol forgotten in his rush to escape the growing tension. But Merib's exit was an unhurried saunter, calculated. Their silken-clad footsteps were the only murmured whispers through marble halls built to house multitudes. Memory painted visions of previous visits, when paradors scurried on errands to assist the council, gliding between rooms like schools of fish through swift currents. The passages bubbled with ritual and responsibility. Now, only empty stone and hollow grandeur greeted them. Merib matched Albruna's stride with practiced grace, but kept a carefully calculated distance, close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid contact. What secrets did she hide? A prickling sensation flitted along Albruna's scalp. "These halls seem quieter than tradition demands." She let the observation drift between them like a lure on dark waters. "Recent changes have streamlined our processes." Merib's diplomatic response offered nothing and everything. Her fingers sketched a subtle pattern against her robe. A nervous tell? Or a hidden signal? Only 2 paradors passed during their walk through the ziggurat's broad base. Their bows, while proper, bore none of the ethereal grace of their fey heritage. The stiff formality dimmed their true nature by years of choosing flesh over spirit. Albruna's light bristled against the underside of her skin, begging to be released. A heaviness settled across her shoulders. 4 more flights of stairs, each weaving back and forth through the successively smaller tiers until they finally reached the top of the ziggurat. Above them loomed the Heptad Tower, its spiraling heights casting shadows from the center of Seganus like a watchful, silent sentinel over the island. Exterior stairs offered a more comfortable climb, allowing a breeze to gently caress her confined body. It was a momentary respite. At the tower's peak, the threshold into the main chamber dampened her lightness, like being covered in thick and restrictive honey. Traveling in corporeal form seemed endless, whereas becoming one with the light could take them anywhere at a moment's thought. She'd arrived eager to share her news, but her hope dimmed with each step. By the time they reached the smaller private council chamber, Albruna's patience had worn as thin as her breath, fraying like threadbare cloth, especially when only the high Hepta greeted them. Tall and lean, Akan held himself with dignity as he waited peacefully. Why was he alone when she should be meeting with the combined force of 7 primary fae? Rising anger forced her pulse to throb against her temples. Enchantment sparked between her fingers. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. I expect to meet with the entire Heptad Council.
I'm afraid it will be just the 3 of us.
Akan's voice held the calm of still water, but something else coursed beneath. He remained too still, too grounded, not even giving a token bow.
The others are elsewhere, Your Majesty. They cannot arrive quickly, and I would hate to waste your time.
How considerate. These were no longer the Fae who had kneeled before Osric, devoting themselves to the High Father to care for the primary spring. Power gathered within Albruna with each heartbeat, pressing against her ribs. This wouldn't do. Her desire to force the High Hepta to yield was not an appropriate response. She needed to remain calm. With great effort, she banked her frustration. She would wait and let them reveal the game they played. Though her visit had to be short, she would be patient for now. Chapter 3. Albruna had yet to reveal her purpose in Edenia. What would make Akan imply that time was of such essence? She hesitated a heartbeat, then continued, undaunted by his pejorative tone. Why was there no parator at the spring? Or so few in the halls, for that matter? As I mentioned, we have created a more proficient system that no longer requires so many to perform all the tasks, Merib said, her lips curving into a smile as empty as the passages they'd traversed. A system better than what your High Father conceived when he created Seganus for you? Albruna's heart wrenched at the thought. That was her son's attitude before his actions tore their celestial home apart.
Forgive our insolence.
Pholus bowed and rose in a startling jerk.
Not that anything required change, but grew into a comfortable precision.
If that were so, the spring would be full, its waters brimming with the enchanted lifeblood of Edenia. Who authorized a second pool? Albruna inhaled deeply. The foolishness of their decision gnawed at her nerves. She mentally sent a silent prayer for patience. It is your duty and honor to care for the primary spring. Nothing else comes before or distracts from that solemn charge.
We agree, Your Majesty. All druids are grateful to the High Father for granting us this blessing.
Akan folded his hands, standing tall, his posture a brazen challenge to the authority of his queen.
It seemed so important, so vital to allow all druids to participate in the care of our utmost precious resource.
Explain. Albruna's patience was wearing thinner than a Noxamoth's wing and growing just as poisonous. Merib and Pholus twisted. facing Akan before he spoke, a silent deference to his guidance.
All citizens now gather within the radiant garden at the Well of Reflection for morning and evening blessing,
Akan explained.
It is an opportunity for the Druids to reconnect with their role as primary Fae within Adenia. Each uses their enchantment to purify a bucket of water from the Galinar Sea and pours it into the well as a symbolic offering.
That is why there are fewer pariters. Merib eased her dark braid over her shoulder, sliding the feathery ends through her fingers. Her voice added a quiet calm to the growing tension. With all druids taking part, there is less need for others to isolate themselves in Aethercrest. Morale inside the city has burgeoned. Morale? Albruna's mind reeled. Why would those in Seganus, the chosen guardians of the primary spring, lack motivation? They were the only Fae in Adenia who could shift into their ethereal forms. They shouldn't need such a ridiculous ritual. It is only the heptad residing within these walls now?
Oh no!
Pholus spread his palms, waving his hands in protest.
There are still pariters, an apprentice for each of us, if something should befall a council member, and also in the kitchens and cleaning service.
He seemed proud to explain how they'd made such drastic changes. Osric designed the massive ziggurat specifically to house all of Seganus. Every druid was to serve the primary spring directly, so enchantment radiated to the other realms. No wonder the waters were low. Only those who tended the garden, farms, and natural lands needed to live outside Aethercrest. Even then, only if they wished. They no longer had that choice. An uncomfortable sensation grew in her belly. This is an unacceptable perversion. The druids belong inside these walls, a living testament to their devotion. They must tend the spring personally within its presence. The heptad had overstepped. How had she been so unaware of the druid's plight? She had to help. There is the ideal, and then there is the practical. Merib's simple statement ensnared her own misguided decisions. Aethercrest stands practically empty. Do the others shift into their primary forms as they offer their blessings? Albruna stiffened, forcing back the desire to shirk the bondage of her current form, the reasons to withhold fading like a mist in sunshine.
They remain in their elven forms,
Akan said.
It is easier to work the land, tend the garden, provide our security, maintain the docks.
Docks? What need have you for ships? Albruna's words hissed through clenched teeth. She leaned back. Heat charged through her body. Her fingernails bit into her palms as a swirl of agitation built. Or security? What does that even mean?
Well, you see,
Pholus rubbed his palms together and shifted from foot to foot in a dismal dance.
There is a need for limited trade. It relieves isolation, you see.
Isolation is by design, to maintain the purity of your purpose. You have privileges beyond all other Fae within Adenia, blessings that carry the favor of extra responsibilities. You must return to the edicts commanded by your High Father. Her pulse raged. Her breath caught in her chest, pressure building.
Adenia's creation was long ago, and with time, things must change, like a river forever carving fresh paths.
Akan lifted his chin in silent challenge, an arch of authority in his brow.
As the rulers of this realm, a mantle of responsibility we wear with solemn duty. We have decided only the heptad and their pariters should care for the spring directly.
Then perhaps it is time for a new council to restore the balance. Albruna released her grip on her powers like a dam bursting forth. Energy fired through her body with brilliant light. Her ethereal form exploded into the room like the sun itself, ready to devour the dark. Chapter 4. Albruna hovered just above the floor, yet maintained a silhouette of her bodily shape, a silent reminder of her authority. They would listen. They would obey. She filled the room with an invisible heaviness, like a hand pressing on the druids until their knees buckled. The heptad represents the voice of your high father, Osric. He called you ambassadors of Kalis, naming you druids in his honor. Obey his commands, or forfeit your place here. Pholus and Merib braced themselves, one hand against the carpeted floor, their heads lowered in submission. Akan alone met her glare, his defiance palpable, a challenge that hung in the air, daring her judgment. The sharp points of his ears turned red from the effort against her power. Will you comply? Albruna's radiance swelled. A blinding light. The air sizzled with her power, rippling her robes and hair as if she floated underwater. At last, Akan lowered his gaze in surrender. We will serve my queen. Albruna wrinkled her nose, the acrid scent of insincerity filling her nostrils. With all devotion, Pholus uttered, his voice a faint echo of the conviction Albruna sought. We meant no disrespect, Merib added softly, a faint tremor in her voice betraying her rigid posture. Their supplication was not enough, barely believable, but she dared not destroy them now. They had discarded their purpose and deserved destruction. But if the heptad needed to be replaced this close to the end of the age, it could spark the collapse of Edenia's future. Her anger had been a righteous flame, but the necessity of it gnawed at her heart. Albruna exhaled, her light dimming as she descended from her ethereal status, settling onto her feet once more. She kept her head high, even as her corporeal form compressed into place. Remember, it took but one phase hubris to shatter our realm during the chasm. Serve genuinely, for Edenia's future rests in your hands. That is your calling. The triad rose, heads still bowed in reverence. Albruna's shoulders relaxed, her fingers uncurled from fists, though she remained unyielding. We have no other intention, Your Majesty, Pholus said, his words a fragile promise. If that were true, she would not have had to make such a spectacle to bring them to heel. Our loyalty to Kalis is unblemished, I assure you. Merib placed her right fist over her heart. It wasn't a gesture Albruna had seen before, yet it appeared like a practiced performance. Her doubts stirred, but she held them close. Whether or not they truly understood the gravity of their service, she had warned them. Her visit had a different purpose that she must continue, despite her reservations and heavy heart. The prophesied event was near, and not even she knew when it would occur. That is yet to be seen, but I did not come to admonish you. There is another important task I must complete. However, before we proceed, you will show me the well of reflection. When is the next blessing? It is nearly time, Akan said. The bells will toll soon. This way, Your Majesty. Merib gave a shallow bow, her eyes glinting with a sharp eagerness as she hurried to the chamber door. It is an honor to have our queen join us. The uneasy tightness in Albruna's chest grasped harder, but duty compelled her onward, even as her instincts whispered warnings. Chapter 5. Albruna swept her gaze over the city from the open-aired staircase, a breeze caressing her face as they descended the tower in single file. The vantage point offered her a bird's-eye view of the entire island as she spiraled downward. After Osric completed the radiant garden surrounding Aethercrest, she and her husband had walked hand in hand among the lush greenery. Birds in every hue of red, yellow, orange, and blue flitted among the thick tree branches, their melodies a symphony of life. Deer and Gentoo and Rabarine and Vulu goat wandered peacefully, their presence a testament to the created harmony. But now, the garden lay before her, a pale imitation of its former glory. 6 pebbled pathways divided the once vibrant expanse into sprawling triangular-shaped lawns radiating from the ziggurat's base, 3 on the north and 3 on the south, an image of control rather than natural artistry. Tall hedges formed intricate patterns, precise and stark, while flowers and ornamental trees stood in neat sections near stone benches, stoic guards instead of welcoming friends. One area closest to the doors into Aethercrest held no ornamentation at all, barren of anything except grass. At the far edge, a stone wall loomed, its height taller than 2 males standing one atop the other, encircled the entire garden, a mocking barrier to the garden's intended purpose. A set of iron gates, the only break in the boundary, swung wide open and ominous, as if ready to ensnare rather than embrace. Though there was a certain beauty in the cultivated grounds, Albruna's throat constricted. Grief settled in her bones over the loss of natural, thriving life, replaced by a hollow echo of its former abundance. She pushed aside thoughts of where the iron had come from, or why it was necessary to enclose the garden, and forced herself to focus on the homes beyond the south side of the wall. Made of dried mud bricks with thatched roofs, they were arranged in orderly formations along narrow streets, a patchwork of dull browns and grays, filling every space from Aethercrest to the rocky severe mountains that ringed the island. On the north side of the wall, however, expansive, verdant fields stretched to the mountains, sparsely dotted with sprawling estates and farms like oases of privilege. With one exception. A single large square building with a tin-like roof stood out as a blemish, with its harsh angles and secretive facade, an eyesore in the otherwise tranquil setting. "The 2 sides of the island seem distinctly different," Albruna said to Merib. "What is that structure over there?" The Hepta glanced casually over the wall to the north. "That is the pedagogy, where the druid elflings receive the very best education. It offers the fresh air and knowledge for young minds. The northern side also boasts the richest soils for cultivating the crops that sustain us all. The radiant garden once provided a bounty of fruits and vegetables to nourish body and soul alike. Change is inevitable, Your Majesty. The formation of the city required a different landscape, a sacrifice for the sake of progress. Progress should not destroy, but enhance what has been." No matter how cheery Merib tried to make her voice, an uncomfortable sensation caused the small hairs on Albruna's neck to rise. "And to the south? Those are the druids who once lived in Aethercrest?"
"Yes, along with the sentinel barracks and a booming bazaar on the east side, near the docks."
Akan spoke from behind her, interjecting into the conversation he must have overheard. Albruna grimaced, then turned her head over her shoulder to address the High Hepta, searching for any sign of deceit in his expression. "Seganus is closed to travelers, is it not?" Akan met her eyes with a calm mask of sincerity.
"It is, Majesty, a policy we hold dear. However, some trade is regrettably necessary for supplies we cannot produce or grow ourselves for the functioning of the city."
It made Albruna nauseous over how flippantly he expected her to accept his decisions. "These changes do not seem to have improved the quality of life for all. It is a tragic shame the heptad has cast aside Osric's wise provisions. A creeping realization settled into Albruna's mind. A suspicion why Osric had sent her to Seganus, rather than addressing the druids himself. As loving as her husband was, deliberate disobedience tried his patience, just as it did her own. When they reached the bottom of the tower, Akan gathered the group at the balustrade surrounding the top and smallest level of the ziggurat.
"You will have a spectacular view from up here with us, Queen Albruna."
Pholus's robes all aflutter as he hurried to claim a spot along the barrier. His cheeks drained of color as she narrowed her eyes in confusion. This was not what she'd commanded. Albruna closed her eyes for a moment, shaking her head. "I wish to see the well up close. I will continue my descent to the garden." "It is best if we maintain a reserved authority," Merib said. "We've found the others give their blessings more freely when we remain at a distance. The paradors preside over the worship, ensuring a smooth flow of devotion."
"Everyone will see you from here, I assure you."
Akan pulled his shoulders back, the hint of satisfaction in his eyes, as though he relished the idea of lording himself over others. Albruna could take no more of their nonsense. "Humility and service are marks of leadership worthy of the titles you bear. We will all stand at the well." It might also be her last chance, albeit bittersweet, to linger in Edenia ahead of what was coming, but she held that secret to herself. Chapter 6. By the time Albruna emerged from the ziggurat onto the path surrounding the once glorious, radiant garden, the small group of druids had grown, joined by 4 sentinels and 3 paradors. Akan halted the group and spoke to the sentinel nearest him.
"Inform Brother Durkin to gather all sentinels in the garden. Have him set up a perimeter around the blessing lawn, ensuring no one approaches the queen." "Yes, sir,"
the sentinel answered, his voice crisp and efficient before hurrying away. "You would deny me access?" Albruna spun to glare at the High Hepta. "Anyone who wishes to visit with me is welcome. There is no barrier, no divide between the druids and Kalis. We are one in spirit and purpose."
"It has been a long while since your last visit to our island, Queen Albruna,"
Akan replied in a practiced diplomatic tone that set her teeth on edge.
"Recently, unrest has slithered through our midst like a serpent, forcing us to adopt new policies."
"Rest assured, we are working tirelessly to root out the rebels responsible and end their disruption." Merib's words tumbled in a rush as if eager to soothe the queen's concerns.
"We will return to a more open environment soon," Pholus said. "Once things are under control, the chaos tamed."
He had grown quieter, though his jittery hands kept rubbing at the base of his throat. He grew even more edgy as their group increased in size. "Visits from myself or the High Father are not inspections nor judgments. Your responsibilities are set, and the choices in governance, whether wise or foolish, are yours alone, as are the consequences." Albruna's skin tingled, agitation growing once again. She clenched the fabric of her skirt, using the silky softness to ground her. "This unrest is the real reason you wanted to keep me above, isn't it? To veil the truth."
"It was merely a suggestion, born from a desire to shield you from our troubles."
Akan's gentle words did little to hide his attempt to guide her away from the truth. Albruna tipped her head toward one of the sentinels. "I find the idea of an enforcement division to be a mockery of Fey enchantment. Do not all druids possess the same innate abilities?" "As we've mentioned, certain restrictions have been necessary," Merib replied. How was Albruna supposed to finish her task and fulfill the duty entrusted to her? The heptad had grown drunk on their own authority, and Sejanus was in disarray. She had half a mind to call upon Osric to join her, to summon his might to set things right. But that was not their way. Like all who lived in Edenia, the Druids had to make their own decisions, no matter how painful the consequences. The heptad was responsible for cleaning up their mess, if that was even possible with the limited time they had left. Won't the Sentinels' duties prevent them from performing their own blessings? Are they not just as worthy to give offerings as anyone else? The Sentinels provide a noble service for all Druids. However, we granted them a special dispensation because of their honored position. They make their offerings in private, after everyone else has left. Merib's pinched voice vibrated with exasperation. It was no honor to be hidden away. They'd blinded themselves to their defective leadership.
Fear of punishment is often the best deterrent, but it can also be the strongest incentive. The Sentinels are respected.
Akan's convictions matched the severity of his dagger-sharp ears. A heart is never inspired to do good deeds through fear. True obedience comes from a desire to love others, a lesson best taught by example. Albruna hoped her words would reach their hearts, even as frustration brewed within her over their arrogance. Pholus twisted, his gaze darting like a frightened fawn seeking escape.
We shall discuss your wise advice at our next council session,
Akan said, exchanging a glance with Merib, a silent conversation passing between them. Both appeared equally annoyed. The bells atop the tower rang, halting further discussion. The sentinels obeyed their orders with remarkable haste, encircling the open grassy area to the right of the garden's gates. Shoulder to shoulder, they formed a blockade in front of a gathering line, stretching far along the city's main road. Akan leaned near Albruna, his breath hot against her ears as he sought to be heard over the din of ringing bells.
We shall stand on the near side of the well as a united front. Merib and Pholus will position themselves on the far side as a balance of power.
The casual order oozed with the air of one who thought too highly of himself. Albruna longed to strip away his cloak of arrogance. She set aside the distaste that threatened to choke her and focused instead on welcoming the incoming druids. She stepped into position, a flicker of warmth slicing through the irritation her visit had so far caused. The well, constructed of tightly stacked stones, forming a perfect knee-high circle, sat near the western edge of the ziggurat, positioned directly above the pool she had discovered in the primary spring cavern. After the last echo of bells faded into the crisp air, Akan raised a hand, a simple signal like a king to his subjects. The sentinels blocking the garden entrance parted to allow the procession of druids to enter, a silent river of bodies flowing through the gates. Only the crunch of pebbles underfoot broke the silence. Clad in robes or tunics with matching pants and hues of goldenrod, crimson, and the occasional sage, the druids filed in. No voices rose in song. No prayers offered devotion. No joy blossomed on any face. Stiff and solemn, they trudged past the well, resigned to dumping their buckets in wordless prayer, eyes blank, shoulders sagging as if from a burden of sorrow. No elflings entered with the throng, no family units or even couples, no bonds of love or connection to lighten their hardships. An ache settled on Albruna's heart. The druids had strayed far from the revered duties laid out after the chasm. After all the signs of decay and neglect she'd witnessed, it pained her to finish her task and entrust the cradle to such errant hands. Amidst the sea of downcast faces, a young female waiting in line for her turn at the well kept glancing at Albruna, her wide eyes a mix of awe and curiosity. At last, someone seemed willing to seek connection. When her turn arrived, Tears filled the druid's eyes as she emptied her offering. In a single fluid moment, she dropped to her knees before Albruna, her head bowed in reverence. Queen of Kalis, is it really you? The young druid's voice trembled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Have you come to help us?
Enough!
Akan's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and brutal as he seized the woman by the elbow, yanking her to her feet.
We'll have none of your nonsense. Move along before you spread your poison.
Tears flowed down the druid's cheeks unchecked as she wrenched her arm away from the Hepta's cruel grasp. Scrambling forward on her knees, she pressed onward until her forehead touched the queen's toes. I beg you, my queen. My heart is broken. Akan bent down, hand outstretched like a claw, ready to snatch the woman again. But Albruna blocked him. She raised her voice to be a beacon to all. Leave her be. Prevent no one from speaking with me. In the eyes of Kalis, all are equally worthy of love and understanding. A muttered growl escaped the High Hepta, and the air turned sour. Chapter 7. Albruna swept her hand as if waving away a fly, and whatever stench Akan caused dissipated. Her heart aching at the woman's distress, she ignored the fuming Hepta and gently lifted the crying druid's chin, meeting her watery gaze. What troubles you, my child? They took my elfling weeks ago. I've had no word from the pedagogy. I'm haunted by nightmares that she is unwell. Her voice trembled like a leaf in a bitter wind.
The pedagogy is not beholden to you. They are exceptional at their tasks.
Akan's lips flattened into a hard line, his whole body twitching with barely contained anger. What is this about, Akan? Albruna met the High Hepta's stare, her patience snapping like an overtaut bowstring.
Now is not the time for distractions. We can discuss this matter after the evening blessing concludes.
Akan scanned the area to Albruna's left, then gestured for a parator to step closer.
Escort this woman to a chamber inside. We will assist her once everyone else finishes.
This mother is distraught. She deserves an answer immediately. It was a simple reassurance worthy of the Heptad's attention.
I will send for a Vivin from the pedagogy to answer her questions,
Akan said, without looking at the tearful Fae. The woman scrambled to follow the parator, a broad smile brightening her face. Thank you, Lord Akan, and to you, my queen. Lord? The inappropriate honorific struck Albruna like a discordant note, her stomach clenching with unease. We have much to discuss. When the next bucket emptied into the well of reflection, Albruna's heart sank. There were too many issues in Seganus, a realm meant to provide the peace of Kalis. Would anyone in Edenia be prepared for what was coming? After the blessing concluded, and once again in the small council chamber, Albruna wasted no time seeking answers. Why would the pedagogy refuse to assure that mother of her elfling's safety? I would like to hear from her directly. She was overly emotional, Merib said. We're allowing her time to rest and refresh. Trouble for any of our citizens is distressing for all of us. From what Albruna had observed, that sentiment seemed unlikely. When will the Vivin arrive?
As soon as possible. They have many elflings in their care whose needs must come before all else.
Akan spoke, as if to a neglectful student. The pedagogy's instruction ensures that all druids are well prepared and ready to become productive members of Seganus, Merib said. I question a system that disregards a parent's right to raise their offspring, Albruna said. Family bonds are an essential tenet of a thriving society. Which is why we cherish the elfling's education so highly. Merib smiled, though the expression didn't reach her eyes. I will personally attend to the woman's needs once we finish our visit. The mother had been upset. Rest would do her good. For the moment, it was the best Albruna could hope. Besides, she grew increasingly weary of lugging her corporeal form. Her visit had grown too long already. Wonderful. Now, unfortunately, we must move on to other matters. I have come to deliver the final piece of the armor of Kalis.
There are no records of an additional piece of armor.
Pholus finally held her gaze steady. His anxiety seemed consumed by curiosity.
I have studied the heartstones and armor extensively.
Albruna's fingers rested on the golden cylinder inside her pocket, but she could not bring herself to withdraw it. It is a vessel to hold all of Edenia's heartstones, including the unenchanted phase loose emerald you possess for them. You must continue safeguarding their terrastone and a new piece of armor as well, until the ancient prophecy is fulfilled and all are redeemed. Akan and Pholus furrowed their brows, but Merib turned icy. The unenchanted heartstone remains without armor because of their shame. Her tone was as cold as her expression. The Talana's enchantment was taken as recompense for their role in the chasm, not as a mark of disgrace. Those who have remained repentant will have their enchantment restored. The mirror age is nearly over, and everyone must be prepared.
The primary spring would have radiated enchantment to the terrastone if it were connected to any armor.
Akan murmured as if to himself, an expression of understanding crossing his face. Enchantment flows to all the heartstones, including the terrastone, even if it is not housed in its armor, albeit in far less measure. That is why the emerald has remained here. A knot tightened in Albruna's chest, especially as Pholus fidgeted again. It is here, correct? Merib glanced at Akan as if equally curious for his reply.
Of course. It's just surprising to learn the prophecy is finally upon us after waiting so long, he replied.
There was more going on. Albruna could feel it to her toes, but she could not withhold the armor from them. It was not her decision to make. You must keep the armor separate from the stone until the time is right. And where is this armor located? Merib asked. Albruna removed the heptagonal cylinder from her pocket, resting it on her open palm. Made of gold and extending from the tip of her middle finger to the base of her hand, it appeared simply decorative rather than the spindle to weave a new future. She rolled the cylinder to reveal an empty concave setting in each of the 7 flat sides, waiting for their heartstone. This is the cradle of honor. Its purpose and function will be revealed in due time. You must take it now, because the first prophesied event is near, marking the end of this age. When that happens, access to and from Kalis will be closed. This was my last chance to bring it to you. Pholus, standing closest to Albruna, reached for the cradle, but Akan lunged to snatch it first.
How will we know when to insert the stone?
There will be an event visible to all. Just before that time, a messenger will arrive with instructions. For now, you need only be concerned with keeping both the cradle and the terrastone safe and apart. We will fulfill our duty as servants of Kalis, Merib said, dipping her head in a slight bow. See that you do. Albruna lacked Osric's gift of omniscience, yet her intuition screamed that the heptad was untrustworthy. Still, her task was to deliver the armor, and she had done so. Her mission complete, it was time to slip back into the light of Kalis. She summoned a staircase that opened near the council chamber door. I will inform the High Father of all we have discussed here today. Be well. And wellness to you. The 3 druids responded in unison. Chapter 8. Akan. Akan gripped the cradle so tight the edges bit into his hand, a golden promise and a warning. The strange message he'd received days ago finally made sense. As soon as the staircase disappeared and the Queen's light dissolved, the other two whirled to crowd him.
You lied to her,
Merib growled.
Unless you know where the Terra Stone is, Folas said, and haven't shared that information.
Akan's lip curled at the audacity of their challenge.
Of course I lied. Did you truly think we should tell the Queen of Kalis we lost the Emerald Heartstone?
Fools. As if he'd risk everything by revealing such a blunder. Merib pressed her lips into a thin line and spun away from Akan.
What are we going to do?
Folas was less restrained, pacing the room like a caged animal.
This is wrong. So wrong.
We are going to find that stone. Merib spoke into the air, keeping her back to Akan. That's all we can do.
We need to find the others, too.
Akan inhaled a measured breath, forcing himself to remain still. These two were trying his patience with their ignorance.
Whoever holds this cradle, with all the Heartstones in place, will control Edenia. We cannot allow that authority to fall into untrustworthy hands. How are we supposed to do that?
Folas threw his hands into the air, his frustration plain.
We can't roam the realms unnoticed. We certainly can't reveal this information to anyone. No, but someone must go. Someone we trust implicitly,
Akan said. It's essential this is handled delicately. We need to ensure their absolute loyalty. Merib's voice softened as she returned to Akan, capturing his gaze. Was that a plea or a challenge? Convince them of the mission's just cause, so they'll do whatever it takes to complete it.
And ensure they keep their mouth shut.
Akan nodded, mentally calculating the danger if word got out about their plans.
If the rebels find out about this, they'll try to locate the stone before we do.
One of our paradors? Merib suggested.
Then we'd have to replace them, which would draw notice.
Understanding finally dawned on Folas as he stared at the shelves filled with scrolls for safekeeping. He rushed over to rummage through the ancient missives with quick, erratic movements.
There might be, if we dare. What are you going on about?
Akan scoffed, crossing his arms as Folas continued his frantic search.
Here!
Folas hurried to a settee at the edge of the room, unfurling a scroll and pointing to the illuminated page.
There's an old myth of one who could travel within the shadows. Some say it's just a story to scare elflings. But what if we could make it a reality?
Merib leaned in, scanning the passage. You're suggesting we change a druid's appearance? Folas bobbed his head like a cork over rapids.
It's more than that. We'd have to alter their primary form as well.
Merib's eyes glittered with a spark of excitement, though she masked it quickly. The myth speaks of the ability to vanish like a shadow. No doors, no thresholds, just pure will. That much enchantment would require help from elsewhere. None of them spoke the Fae's name who wielded the dark forces they might need. Akan did not dare risk exposing his allegiance to another who could help either. He'd have to steer them onto a different track.
Perhaps not if we work together and use the spring.
Akan's jaw tightened as he studied the scroll Folas held open. The faint words swirled through his mind, beckoning, whispering of promises, shadows, travel, secrecy. He could taste the anticipation thick on his tongue.
As keeper of coin, I can guarantee the resources, Folas said. We could bend this myth to serve our needs.
Akan raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
It's risky. Might take a few tries to get it right. Is that really an issue?
Folas shrugged. Merib turned to Akan, resolute. Not for me. Akan's fingers gently brushed the ancient text, each stroke tracing the symbols that promised power over all of Edenia. He could almost feel the energy stirring beneath the parchment, just waiting for the right hand to seize it. His hand. Satisfaction lifted the corner of his mouth.
The sooner we begin, the better.
He slid his gaze to Merib.
You promised the Queen you'd tend to that sniveling mother's needs. Did you not?
I hope you enjoyed listening to Rule of Primes by Kelly N. Jane, narrated by Karyne Norton. I don't often choose stories that clearly lead into a series because I want you all to have the satisfaction of resolution while listening, but her world was so fascinating and I wanted to be able to share it with you. So if you want to continue with the full series or find more of her other books, go to kellynjane.com. While you're there, you can sign up for her newsletter to snag an ebook copy of Rule of Primes, but in the near future, she will be adding another novella from the same series. Isn't it fun that authors tell me secrets like that, and then I get to tell you? The series is called Enchanted Shadows, and it starts with the book Rune of Secrets. So go check it all out. I'll have a direct link in the show notes. If you're new to Finding Fantasy Reads and you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, make sure you find the little follow or plus button, or however it looks in the app that you're using. That way you'll get notified as new episodes come in, and it also helps increase the podcast's visibility, allowing both future applying authors and future listeners to find the show. Thank you all for listening, and happy reading.